And I appreciate the reminder that I should hit record. Sometimes I forget these things. Uh, so Last Chance to See it is an example of a really excellent book about wildlife conservation, because while it of course is about this really serious topic that can be kind of make you upset. The person who wrote it principally is a comedy author, and he really treats the whole thing and the whole experience with a very while it's certainly a serious book, he treats it with enough humor and enough of his own, I guess, humanizing the experience, that I think it was a really valuable read, and really got me motivated to think about wildlife conservation, think about preserving our environment, because I think that we want to have some get some good information out of a book, but I have an awful lot of books sitting around like this right here, which is Abiotic Disorders of Landscape Plants, a Diagnostic Guide. And while certainly it's very valuable for me, it is not, unfortunately, the most entertaining read, as I am trying to pick out that information. It's more of a reference book. So having a book that you can actually read, while you're going to, while you're laying in bed at night, or what have you, or sitting in a chair on a good day, just sitting and reading, is really good. One of the topics that I've hit on here and talked about, and we have a video up for that, is the topic of genetically modified foods. I of course do have my sort of official genetically modified food books, that goes into a lot of the sort of the science behind GMOs, and how they're made, and sort of the environmental effects and all of that. And it's a very good reference book for all that. But again, not written as something that is really just something that you're going to enjoy reading. So kind of in contrast to that, there's a book called Lords of the Harvest. Lords of the Harvest is written by Daniel Charles, and it's all about the history of the development of GMOs. It really goes in sort of the people who were involved in it. He went out and met with a lot of them, and spent a lot of time not only getting through the sort of the technical part of it, but also just some of the history, the people involved, the environmental movement that opposed a lot of things. And I think it's an interesting look into the history of something that really impacts our modern food system. And I think you come away from reading the book not only having, it's well written, and engaging, but it also just gives you a really good background in the science of GMOs, and it doesn't really preach one side of the other. So but it gives you a really good firm background to approach the topic from, and I think it's a valuable book for that. That's Lords of the Harvest by Daniel Charles. Kind of skipping over to to talk about animals a little bit. And I know we already talked a little bit about wildlife conservation, but a lot of us have animals in our life, either as pets, or we may be involved in animal agriculture. There is someone named Dr. Temple Grandin. She is currently still, I believe, a professor in animal science, I believe in Colorado. a very important figure in the animal science world, and has written a number of really interesting books about handling livestock and things like that, as well as some really interesting books on autism and her experiences with that, and how that has shaped her ability to kind of see things from the perspective of the animals that she's working with. A book that I really think is worthwhile for people, um, is is Animals Make Us Human. That's Temple Grandin. You can always find it because it's got the really nice picture of the dog. Everybody loves dogs. Um, everybody with any sense loves dogs. I was thrilled. I got the opportunity to meet Dr. Grandin, and talk with her a little bit. Um, but really good perspective on how humans interact with animals, and gets into some of the livestock industry and the animal industry as well. So, a book that I would definitely recommend. And you're correct over there in the chat area. There is a movie that was made about Temple Grandin, um, that is absolutely worth your time, and kind of gives you an excellent introduction to a really interesting person. I actually stole, I kind of stole something from Dr. Grandin. I had the opportunity to go and hear a talk that she gave, and at the end of the talk, uh, she says, and she kind of speaks in this is kind of an abrupt way, that she gets to the end. It's like, now's my favorite part. This is where people ask me questions. If no one stands up and asks a question, I'm just going to pick someone. And I have absolutely used that, and it works. So I appreciate that from her as well. Just another quick comment before we get into sort of the more specific to gardening books that I'd like to mention. This is a book called A Sand County Almanac. It was written by Aldo Leopold. He was with the United States Forest Service, and it is just a fascinating book. Really, kind of I consider it on the scale of Thoreau, as being worth reading. Talking about his experiences working in forestry and working in wildlife, and just living in the woods. So, really think that's worthwhile. And one of my coworkers who is a forester, considers that one of the most important books that he has ever read. All right, so now I'm going to talk a little bit more about some more gardening specific books, or at least plant specific books. And I see some really great suggestions going on over there in the chat area. Um, and I'm hopeful that you guys are going to be willing to kind of talk back and forth with me. I want to get to a couple of books by an author that I really enjoy. And you're not going to really pick up necessarily a lot about gardening from them, but I just think plants are interesting. And I think that our interaction with plants is really, really interesting, because, of course, we've been working with plants for a really long time. And there's an author named Amy Stewart. Amy Stewart has written several books, and I keep two of them on my bookshelf. I keep meaning to get to others, but she has, the first one is called Wicked Plants, and it's really about all sorts of different plants that are poisonous, but it really tells a story surrounding each of them, and is just really kind of really fascinating. Talks not only about what's going on with the plant and what kind of poison it is, but goes a little bit further, and talks about how that has impacted people. On a somewhat lighter note than that, and if there are any teetotalers in the audience, I hope you won't be offended by this. But her other book is called The Drunken Botanist. And I'm certainly not going to recommend anything to excess, but it really goes into the plants that are important for making all of the things like gin and whiskeys and beers and everything else. And again, not only talks about the plant, but talks about the process, how it's grown, and all sorts of interesting things like that. Um, and It's a lot of fun to read. It's really light. She does cover Datura in her Wicked Plants book. It is absolutely in there. Datura is discussed. She makes, I can find the reference on that really quick. But she absolutely does. It's a pretty good look at a wide range of different plants. And like I said, it's really, really interesting. It's light reading. It's something that you can kind of look at for a few, kind of sit there and, maybe read a few pages at a time and have just kind of a really good time with, and feel like you're getting a little bit of your botany knowledge in while you're being entertained. Amy Stewart, really interesting book, and absolutely well worth your time. Going back and maybe getting to well, whenever I can get over to New Orleans again, which hopefully won't be long. I'm only about 45 minutes from there. Hopefully I will be able to get to the Sazerac house and get some of the visuals. Usually my interaction with Sazerac is a little bit more direct when I'm in New Orleans, but I will enjoy going over there. I have a lot of good friends over in New Orleans. So some things I definitely, really would encourage you to have, is, these field guides are particularly useful. There are a variety of them out there that are produced by the National Audubon Society. Um, Really good references, kind of quick references for identifying all sorts of things. I have one for trees and one for birds and one for insects that I kind of keep handy because occasionally, it's the internet is a wonderful thing, but I think I'm just at maybe I'm of an age where I reach for that book a lot faster sometimes than I'm comfortable reaching for the search engine on my computer. Those field guides are a really good resource, really easy way to identify a lot of things that we're going to encounter in our landscapes. I do get quite a few questions throughout the year about edible plants and foraging and harvesting plants from the wild. And I am generally very hesitant to recommend going out and harvesting wild plants because there is the potential of being poisoned and things like that. Always something you want to be really cautious about because sometimes things that look very similar to some of our edible plants can be quite poisonous. Um, that being said, I do keep a manual for edible wild plants. This one is by Elias and Dykman. And really, this is just a field guide very similar to those Audubon field guides for the edible plants that are here in North America. And there are quite a lot of them. Some of them are kind of unexpected or not things that you would sort of commonly think of as being the thing that I want to go out there and eat. The example that I always think of, is apparently you can eat stinging nettle. I have been, I've gotten the stinging part of stinging nettle before, and found that particularly unpleasant. So I imagine you have to be very careful with it when you're harvesting it to avoid uh, any of those problems. But really interesting, and I do know that a lot of people are interested in going out and harvesting wild plants for food. Again, have a really good reference. Be really careful when you're talking when you're going out and harvesting things, because those plants, that look can look appetizing and yet be very, very dangerous for us. Um, Another, of course, I get a lot of questions about plants for different landscapes and the like. So, always looking for what's going to look good in a particular landscape and be a good native plant. So I keep a big reference book on my bookshelf. This is the Native Plant Primer, written by Carol Ottson. And really, it's just a description of a lot of the native plants that we can use. So, it's broken down into the type of plants. It's broken down by region. So you can kind of look at that. It's not specific to the southeastern United States, but it is it does have a good list of plants. It does break it down so that you can look specifically at plants that are good for the southeastern United States. That's Carol Ottesen, Ottesen. I honestly do not know when this book was published. It's about 20 years old now. Um, just for convenience, I typed that over in the chat area because sometimes how we pronounce it, how we pronounce that name can be a little bit challenging. Um, this book I actually inherited as part of my when I came here. It's just birds in the backyard or birds in your backyard. Um, the author now there is Robert Dolezal, um, and it's really just a good overview of making a really good environment for birds in your landscape. I've really enjoyed it. I made sure to read it because people often ask me, I want to bring in blue jays and bluebirds and things like that. And probably one of the more convenient things it has for me is a good chart on how what size or how to build birdhouses for the different kinds of birds that we might have here in our landscape, which I found particularly useful because you really can be fairly specific about what birds are going to like that particular environment. I'm going to end up with just a huge pile of books over here. I know I'm not spending a lot of time with the different books, but I really, want to get through these and then talk about some more specific garden books. I do get a fair number of questions about, starting a farm. If you're interested in producing vegetables or flowers or something like that to sell at a farmer's market or have a farm stand, then it's not a bad idea to kind of have just kind of a reference on some of the things that you want to think about when you are getting ready to do that. There is a book by Sarah Beth Aubrey, and that is The Profitable Hobby Farm, How to Build a Sustainable Local Foods Business. And what I particularly like about it is that it covers a lot of different areas of that, all the way from, what you're going to grow to all of the planning that needs to go in, how you're going to sell those different products. It talks about cooperatives and agritourism. So it really kind of approaches it from a very broad brush, but gives you a good introduction to that. And I don't know if anybody listening is interested in that, but I think it is a good reference. Kind of bouncing around. I do have my weed identification book that I keep handy. This is Weeds of the South. Very handy as a way to identify a lot of the common weeds that I run into, and helps me work that out. Kind of similarly, I keep a big manual for garden insects because people are often asking me to identify them. And this is The Ultimate Guide to Backyard Bugs, Garden Insects of North America, written by Whitney Cranshaw. And it really is just a very good, expansive expansive book that has a lot of the bugs that you're very often going to run into here in the here in the Southeast and across South America. Excuse me 1 second. Unfortunately, I'm the only person in the office today, and I need to take care of something.